Welcome back to Switch to Linux, and today we're going to talk about your first switch to Linux. So we're going to talk about those first steps that you might want to do when you are just getting started with your Linux desktop. Now, if you've not yet switched to Linux and have not yet put it on your computer, there's a few things that I would recommend that you do before getting to that point. The first is watch a few different videos on a few different distributions and figure out which Linux distribution you're going to be using. Today, I'm actually going to be doing this walkthrough with Linux Mint, which is the distribution that I would recommend for most people. Some of the things I have in this video are going to be applicable to Linux Mint exclusively, and some of them are going to be broad. When it comes to something that's more broad, I will attempt to let you know that if I remember going through all of the different initial first steps. The second thing I'm going to recommend you do is learn how to try out Linux without destroying your current operating system. You're always going to want to have that preserved so you can go back in the event you get into some tight spot. There's different ways to do this. Number one, you can install Linux on your primary computer on a secondary hard drive. It is possible. We have videos on the channel how to do that. The same thing would apply for a USB drive. The next thing you can do is if you have a better computer, you can create a virtual machine and run Linux inside of a virtual machine on your existing operating system that is compatible with Windows or Mac. So you have those options as well. Of course, you could always go out and check Craigslist, eBay, or some other cheap place and find a refurbed old computer, maybe one that's really cheap because it doesn't have an operating system, and just throw Linux on it. That's also a good option. I bought a very, very good computer for $75, no operating system, threw Linux onto it, and it works beautifully. And so there's a lot of different things you can do. The next thing I'm going to recommend that you do before you get started with Linux is make a note of the software applications that you need to use on a day-to-day basis. And then see if, number one, does that application have a Linux version? Or number two, is there a good alternative? Microsoft Office, for example. The vastest majority of people can get away with LibreOffice instead of Microsoft Office. It's a good free alternative. Whereas Microsoft Office, you're not going to get that installed on Linux quite as easily as you might get something else installed. There's also the Adobe Suite packages. Now, if you're a professional, you might still need to keep that Windows or Mac around because you're not going to run the Adobe Suite. And if you need those on the professional level with the specific features that you need, that's what you kind of need. Linux might just be something that you use on the side. But if you're just a casual user, don't worry about Photoshop. You have GIMP, you have Krita, you have other excellent alternatives to those distributions. And so there's other things you can do, but start making a list of what software you're going to need to run on your system. Now, some distributions are going to have a lot of these software packages pre-installed. Some of them are not. It's going to be dependent on which distribution you have chosen. So with those introductory remarks out of the way, we're going to jump on over to the Linux Mint desktop. I'm going to walk you through. So over here, when you first boot up Linux Mint, you have a welcome screen. Several distributions do have one such welcome screen. Some distributions do not. So if it does have a welcome screen, I'd encourage you to take the time to read through it. In this case, it has first steps. Oh, wow, shocking. That's the title of our video. They've done a really good job, and this is one of the reasons I recommend Linux Mint. In their first steps, you can choose your desktop color. We have a variety of accent colors, and you have a light theme and a dark theme. You can go with a more traditional, older type layout or a more modern, newer type layout for the panel. And then there's a few other options. Linux Mint and a few other distributions will have system snapshots. It's very much like the Windows Restore Point. Some distributions have this, some don't. I personally don't ever set this up because I actually found that if I have a problem with my operating system, it is way easier to just plug in the hard drive in another computer, get a copy of my home directory, reinstall the operating system, and drop that home directory back on. It's way easier than messing with system snapshots. I don't even know all the details about how it works, to be perfectly honest. And it is something that was introduced after I was already using Linux Mint. Now, anything that's based on Ubuntu is going to have the driver manager as this tool. Linux Mint is working on its own version of a driver manager because they have a non-Ubuntu based There are several other distributions which will have some form of driver manager. Not all of them do. What this is going to do is it's going to look at your system hardware and it's going to propose other non-open source drivers that you might need to use. This is the same feature that Windows does on a regular basis. To whenever you install something in, it's going to say, hey, here's the new hardware we've detected. Here is the proposed driver. Do you want to install it? If some such driver is available, then this will do it. So install this. Now, if you don't have a welcome screen, you can just come in over here and just type drivers. And then you can see that if your distribution has some form of driver manager, it is most likely going to pop up here in the menu. We have the update manager. And then the rest of these things we're just going to go ahead and walk through. Now, since I don't want to make this video exclusive to Linux Mint, I'm just going to close this and walk you through the things that you might want to do. The first step anytime you get a new Linux distribution is you're going to want to install updates. Now, if you are using something like Arch or Manjaro based on Arch, maybe some Fedoras, maybe some OpenSUSEs, it's going to install all of those updates during the installation process. But most Debian-based, Ubuntu-based, and several other distributions will not do that. So you're going to need to run updates. Now, Linux Mint and several other Linux distributions will have an update manager. It will give you some form of notification. Ubuntu's will give you a pop-up right in the middle of the screen. You can push the OK button. And if you don't see it there, you can search for the menu for there's a software manager, software sources. Usually your software manager is going to do something. Now, the manager here in Linux Mint is actually more software packages. This is one of the few distributions that does not tie the system updates with the software. Most distributions do. And so if you're using one of those, all of your system updates are going to be in your software manager. Linux Mint is one of those standalones. They're not connected. So you do have to use the update manager for Linux Mint. So this is the one I recommend. On first load, it's going to give you the basic information, push OK. The first thing it might do is it might update the manager itself. It's going to ask us, so this is update the manager itself. Here, do you want to switch to a local mirror? What you're going to do here is this means that all of your software is going to come from some repository. The default on this is going to be an Ubuntu, I think, based in the United Kingdom, and a Linux Mint based in the United States. Particularly that Ubuntu one, you want to get something closer. So we're going to click the yes button, enter your password, and then we come over here and we're going to see this is where our mirrors are at. So you just click on these, and this works the same on a lot of distributions. Anything that's going to have the ability to manage your software repositories in the GUI is going to use a very similar system. So click on that, and what it's going to do is it's going to probe all of these different places where these repositories are stored, and then it's going to show you what is the speed of those repositories. Ideally, I generally like to pick one of the highest speed, although I don't always pick the highest speed. Sometimes I'll go with the nearest university to me, like where I'm at in central Pennsylvania. I might see a Vermont Tech, or I might see a Virginia Tech. Those are things that might work. The Linux Mint is good. Here's EvoWise. We're just going to go ahead and click on that. Now, we're not going to click OK yet, because I want to change the base one as well. So again, this one here is going to probe, see who is giving us the fastest speeds. Here again is EvoWise so far. We don't have to wait until everything is done, particularly if you have an idea what's going to work best for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick the same one for here as well. So go ahead and click OK. Now we're going to click the button, update your cache. What this is going to do is it's going to go through your system and see what needs to be updated, what doesn't need to be updated as part of the first update process. So once it's done updating the cache, we can close out this window. And then over here, you can see a new version of the update manager is available. We might want to close this and then reopen it. Just to make sure that we don't have any conflict with what we just did with changing the location of the mirrors. So we're going to go ahead and apply your updates. and then this is going to make the changes to the system. So this first one is something Linux Mint does a lot. It's just an update to the update manager. Now we have an update to the packages. The reason I like Linux Mint for updates is we have the ability to turn on and turn off the updates on a variety of different choices all at once. If you don't really know what you're doing, it's best to just go ahead and let the thing update itself. Generally, it's not going to break itself. And so we'll go ahead and push the apply updates. It gives us an idea of what we are doing. We need to enter our password again. And then once this guy is done, then your system is going to be up to date. Now, as of note, when you are updating your system, you're not going to be able to go into your software manager and make any updates to like installing any new software or anything like that. So while it's doing that, and it's going to take a little bit of time. Right now it's downloading, then it's going to be installing. So it's going to take some time. So let's go ahead and do some other things that you might want to do on your system. So most of your desktop environments, and Linux Mint here uses the Cinnamon desktop environment by default, although there is an XFCE and a Mate version. But most of your desktop environments will have a system settings, and within the system settings, you might see some changes to the themes. This is something that you can easily select your colors, your styles, and things like that. So we can go with the light or with the dark. Here is the icon colors you can choose from. Here is your basic controls you can choose from. And then these are overall desktop themes. Now here on Linux Mint, if you want to see just those simple accent colors again, you can actually get in here and just search for the welcome screen again. And this is a new feature. It's not implemented everywhere yet, but if you're like, oh, I just really want to go ahead and just do something quick and simple, there you go. You can just go ahead and do that. Now we have a dark theme. That one looks a little dreary though. I don't know. There we go. I like that. Let's go ahead and go with that one there. So one of those first early steps, just go into your system settings. Now there's going to be other things in your system settings. This is like the old school Windows control panel. Only it even goes back even older school where you can customize colors, you can customize fonts, you can just do a lot more with your system. Of course, backgrounds, who doesn't like changing around their backgrounds? You can of course get to that on almost every desktop environment just by right-clicking on the desktop and change your background images. You can get to it right here as well. Linux Mint does give us some of the most beautiful backgrounds available by default. So let's go with something like that. There we are. So there we go. That's a nice little background there. Or we can do this kind of matches with our red. Oh, it's a little bright to look at. So let's go back. There we go. This one's nice. Let's do this one here. So you have a lot of good backgrounds to choose from. You have a lot of other options. Now, the other options in here, some of these are going to be shared with different computers. Some of these are not. And here on Cinnamon, and also some of these are going to depend on which distribution you're running. So there might be more or less items inside your system settings depending on what your Linux distribution itself is. And so here we have basic preferences. Here's screensavers, which aren't really screensavers as much anymore as when does the screen time out and show you the clock, and this will determine, can you lock the screen, how long before it shuts off? Do you want to lock the computer? Do you want to delay the actual locking of the computer? So this means, is it going to require a password when you come back to your computer? Since I work alone in a home office inside my house, I always turn those off. If you are in a office space, then yes, you absolutely do want to turn this on so somebody can't come over and log in and access your system. So you can go ahead and do that. Here's any startup applications. You can see there are a lot of startup applications. Let's go ahead and walk through these real quick to see if there's anything in here. Now, this is going to completely depend again on your distribution. These are, this is going to be your screen size adjustments, anything that you've done in your screen size. Control Alt Backspace to restart Xorg. This is an application. You can turn it on, turn it off. Flatpak service will load. If you don't really want to use Flatpaks, you can turn that off. Mint welcome. This will prevent that welcome screen from showing up whether or not you've toggled that button or not. You can enable the print queue. You can enable the SSH agent. If you don't plan on SSHing into the computer, you can go ahead and toggle that guy off. Tray system tray icon when a compatible NVIDIA information is there. I don't use NVIDIA, so I could just easily toggle that guy off as well. Let's toggle that off. Let's toggle that off. System reports will come on if there's any issues. That is this guy down here. That is something that is fairly unique to Linux Mint. And then this is the update manager. Warpinator allows you to transfer files back and forth on the network. I'll probably turn that off because I have my own internal network file system that I use. So there we are. We've customized what is started, what is stopped. Window decorations, how do notifications look. This is your desktop icons. So if you want to have, for example, I like putting the trash icon on the desktop, and I like putting the network icon on the desktop. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn all those on. Now, there has been a trend in Linux to do away with desktop icons. I don't really like that trend, but the desktops that generally do not support icons, at least don't support them well without extensions and plugins, GNOME, Budgie, Pantheon, those guys generally don't support them. Plasma has an easy toggle on off. If you want them or don't want them, you can easily do that. And then Mate, XFCE, Cinnamon, these are all desktop icons by default. Again, you can turn them off. Like you can remove the desktop. Cinnamon, I don't even know if you can disable that feature of the desktop. Now there's a hardware section here. This is going to be any form, if you have graphics tablets, any printers, power management, just all the different hardware devices. And then we have administration. So here's our driver manager again, firewalls, login windows, and then users and groups. So if you wanted to add another user or make adjustments to a user that is here, you can go ahead and make those changes from inside of here. So that's one of the first things you might do is just walk through the system settings, see if there's any setups that you want to do. All right, now our system is up to date. A reboot is required for things to take effect, but it's Linux. We don't have to do anything with that, so we're not going to reboot at this time. So there we walked through your desktop. We've walked through basically setting up your icon or your updates and things like that. The next thing is going to be software. So most of your distributions are going to have a GUI or graphical user interface software manager. So you can go ahead and boot that up. If you happen to be running a distribution without one, then you're going to be relying on the terminal, and then you need to check the documentation. It's either going to be using apt or pacman or EO package or DNF. So there's a variety of different ones. We're not going to go through that in this particular video. We're just going to assume you've picked one of the distributions that has some form of GUI package manager. Usually, if you don't know what the name of it is, just type in software and it's going to be called Software Manager. On Manjaro, it would be called POMIC. There's Synaptic is kind of close. It's sort of graphical, sort of not. You have anything based on GNOME or Budgie might have the GNOME Software Center. Ubuntu's are going to default to the Snap Store, which has repository and Snap packages in them. So it really is going to depend on your distribution, but you should have some form of software manager. Now, when you get inside of here, you can just click on these icons here. If you know, oh, I definitely need FileZilla, you can go ahead and do that. Click on the install. That's going to go ahead and ask you again for your password. And once you've entered your password once on the software manager, it shouldn't keep asking you for it. I don't think it does anyway. So if you need Skype, you can do that. And then if you're not exactly sure what you need, you can just click on a category and have a look. So here, LibreOffice is here. You'll notice it has Libre writer is LibreCalc, but it doesn't have LibreOffice. That's because many Linux distributions realize not everybody works with databasing and things, and so they might not give you the entire suite. And although it does look like Linux Mint does give you the base, there might be some things missing there as well. But nevertheless, you have that. Then you have just a variety of other things that fit under the Office category. The other thing you can do is you can just kind of search. So if you search for email, for example, if you want to find an email client, something to check your email, we have Thunderbird, we have Clausmail, we have Geary. K-Alarm is part of Kmail. Here's a FlatHub version. We'll get to talk about FlatHubs and stuff in a minute. Let's see. I don't see Evolution here. That's usually my preferred. Typing for it. There you go. So Evolution is my preferred email application for a variety of different desktops distributions. So you can click in here each of the individual categories to see what we have. Here's Chromium, Firefox. We've installed FileZilla, Torrent things, Wireshark things, Bluefish Editor, something I use in my day job. So we'll go ahead and install that as well. So you can see, just go in here and add that software. Remember I said make a list of the different software packages that you might need. And then once these guys are installed, they will automatically appear in the menu over here. So under Internet, here you can see we've installed FileZilla. And we've, I don't think, yep, Bluefish Editor, there it is. It's already done, already there. So you can go through here and see where everything is at. Now here on Cinnamon and on other distributions as well, it is possible to change where things are at in the event you want to move something around. On Cinnamon, you can do that from the GUI by right-clicking on the menu and typing Configure. Go down to Menu and then open the menu editor. And then you can actually just move things around from category to category. So, if we just did the programming Bluefish Editor, if you want to move this somewhere else, you can't just drag them and drop them, but you can cut it or you can copy it and then you can paste it somewhere else and it will automatically adjust itself. You might need to restart Cinnamon for it to do that. But those are some of those early first steps. So as a very brief summary for what you might want to do when you first get started with a Linux distribution, the first thing is getting those updates installed. The second thing is going through your theming and your setup. And the third thing is getting any software installed that you might. Look at those startup applications. There might be something that you add to your startup applications. There might be things that you remove from it. And I, of course, always change my clocks around so that they have the right format, the right date profiles. I might move around my panel a little bit here. These are all those types of little things to do, but hopefully this will give you some thoughts, just some ideas to get started when you are trying out Linux for the first time. And again, if you have not yet switched to Linux, you do not need to destroy your current operating system. In fact, I'd advise against it because you don't want to run into something where it's like you just can't figure out how to do something right now. You get frustrated and you get mad at Linux, and then you're sorry that you don't have your old Windows or Mac laying around. So the fact is you can easily try this out without destroying your current system, and I'd encourage you to do that and then slowly migrate into it, and that will make your transition to Linux very helpful. Well, thanks for watching. I do have several ways you can help support the channel if you're interested. Having a look at switchedtolinux.com/support will show you all of those different ways. We are on Patreon, Subscribestar, and my own homebrewed Think Life media as well. So thanks for watching, guys, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.